Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 3. I realize that you have already read chapter 3 for this week, and your paper was based on a part of what chapter 3 has to offer. However, there is a portion of chapter 3 that wasn't addressed that I'm just going to go over briefly because it is going to be something you'll need to know for either your midterm, your final, or both. Again, I'm going to go through some of these slides fairly quickly because you've already read some of this. Also, because I have the ability to upload this in YouTube, I only have 15 minutes. So a lot of slides to get through in 15 minutes. But basically, what do laws do? Well, we all know what laws do. And I am going to go ahead and offer you this PowerPoint slide if it does help you review for your midterm or your final. Just let me know by email. Um, there are several types of law. We're, of course, focusing on criminal law, which I've underlined and put in bold text. And I go through in this PowerPoint the individual types of law, give you the definition, maybe a couple of examples. Getting down to criminal law, I think we've all heard it referred to as the penal law as well. Okay. Some people do get confused with civil law. Civil law is generally something that pertains to relationships between people, businesses, other organizations, uh, say like child custody issues. That's a civil matter and it's dealt with in civil court. So there are civil laws that pertain to that type of a, um, I guess, issue. However, that might not be the best example to use for this. Let's say that hypothetically you're walking down the street and you fall and trip on some uh, broken pavement and you want to get some type of compensation. That's generally a civil matter. Um, that's the type of thing that you would go to a civil court or go to conciliation court for. So not to muddy the water here, but just so we can kind of get the difference. All right, you all wrote your paper on the 5 violation types, categories of violations of crime. And I know some people got confused with the violations versus the types of law. I'm not going to berate you for that, but again, I strongly encourage you to read your textbook and maybe just find out what the definitions of each one of these categories entails so that you know the difference between what a violation is and what a type of law is. And I realize this is an intro class, so we're all still just learning. I do break down this PowerPoint into individual slides pertaining to the individual violations, such as felonies, misdemeanors, offenses, treason and espionage, and also inchoate offenses. And these are offenses that have not yet been completed. So we can look at like conspiracy as an inchoate type of an offense. There's also features of a crime. You have generally a lot of people say, well, there's only 2 elements of a crime, but really there's 3 types of features. We have the actus reus, which is the criminal act itself. We have the mens rea, which is the culpable mental state, and then you have the concurrence of the two, the combining of the two. Okay. Actus reus is the guilty act, and don't be confused with any questions on maybe a final or a midterm that says something about an omission to act is not a actus reus. It is. If you are, if you know that there's some type of a crime that's going to occur, but you fail to report it, you fail to act, you too are then guilty, or you have uh, performed a guilty act. Okay, so if you go down here, down to about the middle of this slide, you'll see that actus reus can include threats, an omission to act, attempted criminal acts, and conspiracies. And by like an attempted criminal act, let's say kids that stand over a freeway overpass and they drop big rocks down and they don't hit any cars. Well, they're attempting to create property damage or whatever else they're doing. So they are still guilty. They are still performing a guilty act. The guilty mind or mens rea, it refers to a person's mental state at the time the act was committed. And there are four levels of mens rea: purposeful, knowing, reckless, and negligent. And a lot of times people will refer to mens rea as one's motive, but that's not true. It's really their mental state at the time that their act was committed. So, like, you're driving while intoxicated and then you hit somebody who is just walking down the sidewalk. There is going to be some type of one of these four levels of your mens rea. Was it purposeful? Did you do it knowingly? Was there some recklessness involved, or was it simply a negligent act? Now, let's talk about strict liability offenses. They're a special category of crime because they don't require any type of a culpable mental state. These generally will include things like traffic laws, narcotics laws, health and safety regulations, and I like to use the example of Wally the beer man, who was arrested for serving a minor alcohol. Wally did not have any intent to serve a minor, but because alcohol issues as it pertains to minor consumption is considered a strict liability offense. Okay, so he was actually charged with a strict liability offense. So these are kind of confusing and oftentimes they can be very frustrating because when you're somebody who's an upstanding citizen, the last thing you want is for someone to say that you are charged with a crime or you've committed a crime. Because in your head, you haven't had that mental state or that desire to commit a crime, so to speak. All right. And then the concurrence. It's generally combining the guilty mind and the guilty act together for the crime to take place. Now, here's where I want you to just review very very I guess carefully because I'm not saying for sure, but I have pretty good idea that on either your midterm or your final exam that there will be some questions pertaining to the defenses of criminal charges. If you scroll down to the middle of the slide here, you'll see that there are four broad categories of defenses. You've got alibi, you've got something called justifications, you've got excuses, and then you've got procedural defenses. Now, with the exception of alibi, the other three categories have additional defenses listed. So there are a wide variety of different defenses, but your job is to know, is it a justification? Is it an excuse? Is it a procedural defense? Alibi is quite easy to remember because it's really a category all on its own, and it's simply just a statement or a contention by the defendant stating that he or she could not have committed the crime in question because he or she was somewhere else at that time. Now, when you get into justifications, excuses, and procedural defenses, oftentimes these will include basically an admission of the act itself, but then there's a reason that the act occurred, meaning there was a justification for that act or an excuse for that act, or a procedural defense saying this is why the act occurred. Now, for justification defenses, again, the defendant will admit to committing the offense, but believes that they should not be held legally or criminally, sorry, responsible because of a legally sufficient justification for their actions. And we look at self-defense, necessity, defense of others, consent, defense of a home or property, and resisting a lawful arrest. Now, I'm going to just go through these slides very quickly, but I do want you to read through this in your textbook so that you have a better understanding of what type of definition is or I should say, what type of description for each one of these justifications. And because I want you to be successful on your exams as well. We all know what self-defense is. I'm not going to read through this for you. Defense of others, you may use reasonable force to defend others who are or may appear to be in imminent danger, but this does not give you the, um, I guess, free rein to jump into an illegal fight to help somebody. Okay. Defense of home and property. Again, I'll let you read through this on your own. Let's see here. Necessity. Um, One can sometimes violate the law when the purpose of the action is to prevent a greater harm. Um, don't have an example right off the bat, but courts have a difficult time with this defense, especially when it results in a person's death. Maybe, here, I guess here's an example. Let's say that there is a festival going on and there are lots and lots of people there, and all of a sudden you see a car coming towards the group of festival attendees, and you realize, oh my God, that car is going to mow down all those people at the festival. And then you take your vehicle, which is a much bigger Suburban, and you drive right towards that vehicle, uh, that's heading towards the innocent bystanders, and you take out that vehicle and you kill the driver. Well, your defense would be a defense of necessity. So, consent. Again, let's look at the example. Let's say a victim dies during rough sex. If that victim had consented to having rough sex and then something happened, say they died, or now they're claiming some other type of violation occurred, the defense would be consent. Resisting an unlawful arrest. Again, this is not a very successful defense, and I don't know how many people actually use it anymore, but it's something that you can read through in your textbook. Now, the third category of defenses is excuses, and you can see there's a litany of them: duress, provocation, age. Insanity is one that's very difficult to prove. Mistake. Diminished capacity is very interesting, and I'll kind of scroll down to that one quickly. We have involuntary intoxication, mental incompetence. Now, that's different than insanity. And then you have unconsciousness. Let's get to diminished capacity. Diminished capacity is something that a lot of defense attorneys use for individuals who have maybe caused property damage or personal harm to someone while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The defense is that that person's mental condition was diminished due to the alcohol or the narcotics that they had consumed, and therefore their degree of responsibility should be less, which I'm sure you agree with me is kind of bunk, but it's a valid defense, quite honestly. Okay, we've only got a couple more slides left. And again, mental incompetence, I do encourage you to read through this. A lot of times it's primarily incompetent to stand trial as a result of mental illness, defect, or disability. That's different than insanity, criteria that needs to be met at the time that the act occurred. All right. And then last category of criminal defenses is the procedural defenses. And bottom line, those are entrapment, denial of a speedy trial, double jeopardy, prosecutorial misconduct, and police fraud. And with these defenses, a defendant claims that they were in some way discriminated against in the justice process or that some important aspect of the official procedure was not properly followed in the investigation or prosecution of the crime charged. So with that being said, I'm going to end this lecture. I do apologize for how quickly I went through this. I do upload these into YouTube, and unfortunately, I only have a 15-minute limit. Again, if you would like copies of this PowerPoint presentation, I'd be more than happy to send that to you via email. So please let me know. Have a good week. Thank you.